Svelte is getting rid of its TypeScript dependency and is rewriting its entire codebase in plain old JavaScript. Wait, what? For good reason, people got riled up when they heard the news. Complain as much as you want about the front-end world, but one thing is certain. The JavaScript ecosystem will never ever cease to amaze you. The community is going back and forth on frameworks, tools, and best practices on a weekly basis. I get it. You have the right to be frustrated. After all, we spent years pushing forward the TypeScript agenda, and now, when pretty much everyone seems to be on board with it, Svelte, one of the poster kids of front-end development, completely switches course. Should you really be worried about this decision though? We will spend the next couple of minutes figuring it out. There is one thing we need to set straight from the beginning. Svelte is a tool aimed at developers, so its inherent needs and requirements are going to be different from your day-to-day project needs. With this clarification in mind, the decision to get rid of TypeScript will make much more sense, especially since you'll find alternatives such as JSDoc out there. Okay, so why would you want to add TypeScript in your project in the first place? For years, flavors of ECMAScript were more than enough. It wasn't until Angular took a chance and made TypeScript their default programming language that the front-end community started to slowly adopt TS in their projects. This wide adoption of TypeScript is probably best reflected in GitHub's State of the Octoverse, where the massive jump in usage is extremely visible. In my opinion, TypeScript was able to find the sweet spot between non-intrusive gradual adoption and solving real issues in JavaScript codebases. I don't think that, in this day and age, the benefits of a type system should still be debated. Web development is always growing in size and complexity, and the types of products devs are working on have huge codebases, strict security needs, and reliability expectations. TypeScript is adding a useful thin layer of type safety over JavaScript, and this slight adjustment opens the door for a lot of possibilities. On one hand, you get a compilation step where various issues can be caught and fixed early on. On the other hand, TypeScript enables a way better development experience with just the right amount of code self-documentation. I'm saying the right amount of documentation because, guess what? Trigger warning, I don't believe in documenting your code. Stop. Please don't close this video just yet and let me explain myself. I do believe documentation is useful, but just in certain scenarios. I need to jump into a new service my colleagues created, then sure, I'd like a README file explaining the setup steps and the overall architecture of the project. However, if I am opening a random service file and the first method in there has 200 lines of code and 15 lines of documentation at the top of it, I'm going to be 1. Really annoyed, and 2. Really discouraged. I am a strong believer that in 99% of the cases, if you feel the need to document your code, you should actually refactor that code until it is pretty much self-explaining itself. In my experience, this is what TypeScript enables for front-end projects. The type of mechanism needed to make your code cleaner and easier to work with. In just a second, we'll look into JSDoc, the TypeScript alternative Svelte is choosing, and you'll get a chance to see a different mindset regarding documentation. Now, getting back to TypeScript, you don't have to worry about a thing. Large players like Dino are betting on it these days, so TS is not going anywhere. Sure, there are some drawbacks if you are into nitpicking, since the compilation step technically adds a layer of complexity and friction in your project. Also, navigating through TypeScript projects is not always as easy as it should be. However, its benefits are still undeniable, so stick with TypeScript in your project or adopt it if you haven't done it already. For Svelte, however, it turns out that these slight inconveniences of TypeScript codebases are enough to convince them to remove the complexity and simply stick with JavaScript. It is important to mention that SvelteKit was already using this approach, so their decision is quite informed. Again, the Svelte team is building software tools, so their use cases are vastly different from your day-to-day use cases. Interestingly enough, the need for type checking and code documentation still remains, so they adopted a tiny little tool called JSDoc to address these issues. Let's spend a couple of minutes looking at the dev experience with JSDoc next. In a JavaScript file, I defined a simple member class with a few private fields, a constructor, and a getName method. Whenever I want to create an instance of the member class, JavaScript allows me to pass any type of value as the arguments. Of course, this can lead to a lot of issues at runtime, and it was the main use case TypeScript was solving. With JSDoc, I can start typing /*, hit enter, and a comment paragraph template was added in by the IDE for me. In here, I can simply define my field types using the usual JS types or any other class I might have defined in my project. The code should be pretty self-explanatory. The param annotation defines a new argument, then we add the type in the curly braces followed by the argument name. You have some flexibility and options here, so make sure you check out the docs in detail. For instance, I can define an argument as optional using the square brackets, and any text defined after the argument name will be treated as the argument description. You can also define a description for the constructor, and, just like that, we ended up with a comment equal in size with our constructor. Going back to the code documentation discussion we had earlier, more often than not, I am seeing in comments entries such as email, the email, and logged, the logged state, which is not that smart in my opinion. Anyhow, once you have your params in place, the IDE will provide way more details when interacting with your class. Of course, there is no compilation step to actually force you to follow these rules, but it is a step in the right direction. JSDoc offers a lot of tags to document your codebase, from ways to mark your code async to clearly specified return types. Finally, another nice little feature is the option to create a documentation site based on all your comments and tags. Install the JSDoc library in your project and then simply run the JSDoc command, and you'll end up with a useful site offering an overview of all your entities and methods. I agree, this is pretty neat. If you found this video useful, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, thank you for watching.